Hi everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar today about how to write kick butt cover letters. I know it's a topic that a lot of people aren't super excited about, so hopefully after we're done today, we can share some tips and ideas and possibly even some examples of how to write a cover letter that grabs the attention of the employer, isn't boring, but still gets to the point quickly, and most importantly, gets read by the human resource manager. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we will get started. So I like to do things kind of in a top 10 format, just because I think it gives people a better idea of quick and easy tips that they can absolutely implement when they're writing cover letters. So we'll go ahead and get started about some of the tips and ideas. So just a little bit about me, if you're not familiar, I am a certified professional resume writer. So I've actually been writing resumes since 2008, and I've written, and actually that should probably be updated at this point, I've written far more than 1,000 resumes for people in a variety of fields. And oftentimes when clients come to me, we do a resume and a cover letter. So I wanted to specifically talk about cover letters today because I know a lot of people have trouble with them. So here's just some statistics for you that can be a little bit frightening. A recruiter actually only spends about 5 to 7 seconds on your resume, and probably even less time on the cover letter. 250 resumes on average are received for each job position, so you really don't have a lot of time to grab attention. And oftentimes, including a cover letter can either be the make or break regarding if a HR professional calls you. Now, the funny thing is one of the questions that I get all of the time is, do I really need a cover letter? You know, do employers really read them? Do recruiters read them? And a funny story from a couple of years ago, I was at a resume writing conference, and there was actually 2 different recruiters up on the stage kind of telling us about how they go through the process of deciding who to call, who to send to clients. And one of them said, I throw cover letters away. I don't even look at them, don't bother. The other recruiter said, that's the first thing I read. I actually read it before the resume, and that helps determine who I call it. And I just share that with you because it just shows that each hiring manager and each recruiter really does have a different way that they go about the hiring process. But I always think that having a cover letter available to you, if they don't ask for it, fine, but if they do, then you have something to go with. You have something to start with. So I do think it's important to have one. So, like I mentioned, some jobs require them, some don't. I always tell my clients as well that even if you have a cover letter and the company doesn't specifically ask for one, oftentimes when you're applying online through an applicant tracking system, it does give you an opportunity to include, quote, an other document. Or there's still a place to put a personalized message or an email. And I think that you can still use some of that cover letter verbiage in that particular area. And I firmly believe that no one has ever not been considered for a job opportunity because they did go ahead and send a cover letter. So that's just my opinion. I think it's better to have one and not need it than the other way around. And so why is it so challenging? And this can go for a resume or a cover letter, but particularly the cover letter because we're including longer versions of text. We're talking about ourselves more. And the honest truth is that most people don't like to talk, write, or sit around and think about their strengths and their achievements and how to best put that into words. Because what happens is people often feel like they're bragging about their accomplishments. The other part that becomes challenging, especially if you've worked 10, 15, 20 plus years, is figuring out, what do I include in this cover letter? This is important, that's important. Maybe I shouldn't include this, what about that? So it's really difficult to kind of figure out where to draw that line in the sand and what to include and what not to include. So some questions to ask yourself when you're starting to write this document. Instead of thinking to yourself, what would I say my strengths are? Think about what would your boss or your manager say about you? How would your coworkers describe working with you? You know, what's the best compliment that you've ever received at work from a client, a team member, maybe somebody that you supervise, maybe your manager? And really, what has been the favorite part of your job? Because oftentimes, if you can identify, you know, I really don't like doing this paperwork and all of this documentation, but I absolutely love meeting with clients and love building those relationships, that's an easy way for you to kind of start to figure out what your strengths are and how to identify them when you're putting together your cover letter. So tip number 1, formatting. So now we're going to get into our top 10 tips. So if you take notes, these would be the little things to kind of remember. And my email address will actually be on the last slide, and you're more than welcome to write that down as well. And I would be happy to send these slides to you. So tip number 1 is formatting. As much as possible, and I would just say, you know, actually copy and paste the heading from your resume to your cover letter. Make sure that it matches. You know, use the same font, the same text size, the same heading information. Make sure all your bullets are in alignment. And yes, I actually use bullet points on my cover letters. But you just want to make sure the formatting is nice and clean and concise. I would even say use a font, and this goes for your cover letter and your resume. Use a sans serif font like Calibri, Arial, Tahoma is a good one as well, just because they are easier to read. And we want to make sure that we're not using any kind of strange or odd formatting, because a lot of times, especially if you're not using the same version of Microsoft Word or whatever it is that you're utilizing, when the recipient receives it, the formatting can get kind of mixed up. And we want to make sure that it looks as nice as possible, because this is your first impression with the company. Be concise. Now think about this. If a recruiter or hiring manager is receiving, on average, let's just say 25 or even 50 resumes for a job opening, 50 resumes, 50 cover letters, they're not going to sit there and read every single thing on every single document. So get to the point. And when I say that, I mean that with love, obviously, because I'm sure that all of us have done a lot of wonderful things in past work experiences, but you cannot include all of it. Pick out the highlights and get to the point rather quickly. In the cover letters that I make for my clients, I like to use a 4-paragraph format, where the first paragraph we identify a few adjectives that describe the person, as well as identify the position they're applying for, because oftentimes companies are hiring for multiple positions at the same time. Then I call the middle part a paragraph, but actually it's usually 3 to 4 bullets, where I really highlight 3 or 4 achievements or accomplishments of that person, so that I know if somebody just glances at that cover letter, their eyes are going to go towards those bullets, and they'll say, oh, this person did bing, bing, bing. And so then I'm going to read the rest of the document. And then the last paragraph is just, thanking them and telling them that you're looking forward to hearing from them. So short and to the point. Tip number 3 is to use the you attitude. And when I'm using the you attitude here, I'm talking about the you in this case is the employer. So what's in it for the employer? When people make cover letters, the first thing they do is start the first paragraph by saying, I saw your advertisement for an account manager position. I am very interested because I have the following skills. I've worked at ABC Company since, 2002. The last paragraph will say typically something like, I look forward to hearing from you. And if you start to quickly scan kind of the left margin of the person's cover letter, you quickly notice that every single paragraph starts with the word I. So we really have to think about what's in it for the employer. Yes, I have good leadership skills, I'm good at project management, I'm good at building relationships, but what's in it for the employer? Because of these skills, I can increase your sales. Because of these skills, I can elevate your customer service, whatever the case might be. But just keep in mind that you have to put yourself in the employer's shoes as much as possible. And at the end of the day, the question you really have to ask yourself is, does it matter? I'm putting this in there. I'm taking up valuable space on this cover letter. Is this pertinent to this job opportunity? The one that I always say is, 20, 25 years ago, when I was in high school, I was a bank teller. I don't put that on my cover letter, and I don't put it on my resume either. Unless I am applying to a bank, it doesn't matter at this point. Yeah, it was a great job. I loved it, but it doesn't matter. So if it doesn't matter, leave it off of there. Tip number 4 has to do with addressing the cover letter and the salutation specifically. Don't use something that looks like a form letter, so don't use "to whom it may concern" or "dear sir" or "madam." Those come across as completely old-fashioned and showcasing, honestly, that you haven't taken any time at all to, number one, either read the advertisement and find out the hiring person's name from there, or at the bare minimum to use "dear hiring manager," "dear HR leader," whatever the case might be. Try to do research as much as you can. That can mean going on a company's website. It can mean calling there saying, "Hey, I'm going to be applying for the account manager position. Could you tell me who I should address my information to?" Sometimes, in all honesty, the company doesn't put that out there because they don't want Bob Smith or Jenny Jones to receive, 200 resumes in their email or in the mail. So we need to make sure that we're being smart. If you can't find out, that's okay. But again, at the bare minimum, at least put "your hiring manager" or "your recruiter." And do your absolute best to find out the person's name. That's so important. And don't make it appear like a form letter. Because the thing is when you start to see what is perceived as a form letter, the company's thinking that you're just blanketing resumes, blanketing cover letters all over. You probably sent it to 200 places, and our place really doesn't matter. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's how it comes across. So make sure you're doing everything humanly possible to find out who to send it to. This is one of my favorites. So tip number 5 is don't apologize. And you might be thinking, well, what would I apologize for? So it's not exactly saying like, "I'm sorry," but one of the things that I've often seen people do is say something in the cover letter like, "Although I don't have the required bachelor's degree in marketing, I do have a 2-year degree from, ABC Technical College." Don't use the cover letter as the spot to identify the things you don't have. They will figure it out. Identify your strengths, identify your accomplishments, and what you can bring to the table. They're going to notice you don't have the bachelor's degree, but if you have 20 or 25 years of pertinent, relative, and relevant experience, they might call you in for an interview anyway. So don't highlight the things that you're missing. And I'll be honest, a lot of times those job postings, I call it kind of the blue sky approach, the perfect person, the ideal candidate. You know what? That person may not exist. That perfect job candidate might not have 10 years of experience plus a bachelor's degree plus this, that, and the other thing. So don't draw attention to those things that you're missing and instead focus on the good. Okay? Highlight your strengths. Use your cover letter for that rather than focusing on the negatives or the things that you are missing. Tip number 6 is to utilize quantitative information. Now, what does this mean? It means instead of saying, "I'm experienced at increasing sales and building long-term relationships," you say something like, "In the past 3 months with my current employer, I've increased sales by over $25,000 and secured, 3 new accounts." Putting numbers in there, using dollar amounts, percentages, number of employees, number of projects, number of accounts, whatever the case might be. If you can throw a number in there or a percentage or a dollar sign, I am telling you that the reader's eyes automatically go towards that. So in sales positions, it's super easy because most of the time they're tracking all of that information. Now, let's say you run, let's say you're a office receptionist or front desk person at a dentist office. you don't have sales that you're necessarily increasing. However, you could say something like inventory, 50 different kinds of instruments, and, call upon 25 clients per day or 25 patients per day. Anything you can do to quantify your information, the better off you are. So in some positions, you do have to be a little bit more creative with this, but think creatively, really sit and think about what you've done and how you can possibly quantify that information, because these are perfect things to use as those bullet points in your cover letters. Tip number 7 is don't repeat the resume. So sometimes it's really easy, to put together this resume, all the jobs, all the skills, your education, all of that. And then you're like, well, what am I going to put in the cover letter? Well, I'll just pull some of this information. And I'm not saying you can't repeat any of it, because you probably do need to repeat some of it. But if there is an additional achievement or accomplishment, or maybe a volunteer thing that you've done in the past that you didn't have room for in the resume, add that snippet to the cover letter. If you can add that new information, it gives the reader just another opportunity to get to know you, and it gives the reader something else to learn about you and possibly a way to connect with you, which is important too. So look at the cover letter as an extension and as a way to kind of expand the information that you've included in the resume. Tip number 8, customize cover letter versus canned. Now the canned, really, I am talking about kind of that form letter. So in the beginning paragraph or first sentence or two, specify the name of the position you're looking for. Don't just say the open position within your company, because that looks canned. It looks like a form letter. If you can say something in there, a little drop or a little drip about, I saw your recent advertisement or your recent promotion towards being the top 50 employers in the country within your industry. Anytime you can include a little nugget about the company that really shows you've done your homework, you know what they stand for, that's great. Sometimes I've seen people, and I've done it for clients as well, if you can find like their mission statement online or their target customer and say something about that, that comes across as you doing your homework as well. And be specific regarding the skills required. I've seen cover letters before where maybe they identify 2 or 3 skills or background things that you have to have for this position. So you can list those here and then say, this is how I meet that goal. This is how I have that skill. This is my experience that allows me to fulfill this position. So aligning it as closely as you can. And then again, listing that quantitative information, but making sure that it does align with the open position of the company. Now, sometimes I think people are like, what do you mean add a testimonial? And I say this, but I'm telling you, it can make the difference. So if you have space on your cover letter, and let's say you're applying somewhere locally where you currently live, and you have a really well-known connection with somebody that's prominent in the area business community. If that person has given you a written testimonial, a recommendation on LinkedIn, or something that's documented, and I still highly suggest checking with the person to make sure it's okay to do this. But on your cover letter, maybe one of those bullet points towards the bottom says a little bit of that testimonial. And I'm not talking like a paragraph, I'm thinking a sentence or a phrase or two here. But sometimes if you can include that third-party validation, it really gives added weight to what you are already saying, okay? So sometimes what I like to do is just list 1 or 2 lines from an endorsee to highlight the person's strengths. This is definitely not something you have to do, but it's an opportunity, again, to provide that third-party validation and say, these are all the things that I'm saying, but, Bob Jones over here said this about me, or Jim Smith said this about me, whatever the case might be. It's just kind of a nice way, again, to kind of add that additional oomph to your cover letter and give you some credibility in your area as well. And tip number 10 is end positively. I remember a couple of years ago, I actually wrote a cover letter for a nurse, And at the end, I say something like this last bullet on this slide, or I look forward to your positive response, something like that. And I remember that she said it sounded too forward. And I said, you know, you're more than welcome to change this, but you have to show confidence in your own abilities. Because if you put something in there like, I hope to hear from you, I hope we're a good fit, something like that, you are already in your mind kind of like, oh, I hope they call. I'm not sure if I'm the right person. You need to make this sound like you know you are the right person for this position. So show confidence in yourself and don't be worried about bragging. Because if you really are just listing your accomplishments, your achievements, and your skills and strengths, you're just telling the person or the reader how you are as an employee. You know, you aren't bragging. So I think a lot of us need to kind of get over that when writing a cover letter or a resume, because you're just telling what you've done. You really, really are. So I look forward to your positive response. Like, I know you're going to call me. I'm just waiting for that to happen. So be positive and don't be wishy-washy at the end of your cover letter. Cover letters really are your chance to be you, and it is a chance to sell yourself. Again, kind of going back to the beginning, follow the directions of the employer. If there's no space for the cover letter, then maybe use a portion of it or a chunk of it when you're sending an email, but make sure you follow the directions of what they're asking for. And always tailor the information towards the employer if you can absolutely do that, because that can make a huge difference between coming across as somebody that's just sending, 20, 30, 40 resumes out, or somebody that's sending a few out, but really being smart and really being cognizant of who they're sending those to. So as promised on the last slide here, I do have my phone number, my email address. If you would like these slides, I would be happy to email them to you or send them to you. I'm actually going to stop sharing the screen now. And I would just like to know if anybody has any questions. If not, that's fine too, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about cover letters. And I just unmuted everybody. So if you do have questions, absolutely feel free to share. And I will put my email address in the chat box as well. If you would like the slides, I'd be happy to do that. Also, please keep in mind that if you have a cover letter that you've been using, if you have a resume that you've been using and sending it out and aren't getting the responses that you're really hoping for, I do offer free resume and cover letter reviews and would be happy to take a look at them. Sometimes it is just having kind of somebody else, not you, take a look at the information. That really is the biggest part of searching for a job, I firmly believe, is that it's so difficult and challenging to write about yourself. People get stuck. And oftentimes they do find the perfect job opportunity. They've got the skills, they have the experience, they have the education, but they can't put it into words. And again, a lot of that just boils down to it's hard to write about yourself. So again, I'd be happy to look at anybody's resume, cover letter as well and help you with that. Doesn't look like anybody has any questions. And I will actually post this on my YouTube channel as well and send that out either later this afternoon or tomorrow, just so you guys have that link if you want it for any reason. But I appreciate that you joined me live today. I know sometimes it's hard to fit this in your schedule, and I know it's a lot of information really, really quickly. But I just get so excited about resumes and cover letters and trying to help people write about themselves that I just really want to share this information. So I appreciate you joining me today. And like I said, I will post this on my YouTube channel. My email address is here. If you do want a free resume review or a cover letter review, I would be happy to do that. And I thank you for joining me. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.